Hello.
Hello.
Good. Sorry. I need to go to the glass.
Just saw my mailbox.
I got myself some homework from down the road. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I just saw that my mailbox is full, so I just have to do a little bit of clicking on buttons. How are you?
I'm well actually.
Good. Hi, Carl.
Hello. Right, let's get a glass. I'll be back in a moment.
I might go grab a little bit of a refill here myself real quick.
Actually, one interesting thing, I've been sort of tracking the Noda thing, and I know it's in the context of the prototyping stuff. It's an app and it's pay for all that, but it's interesting. They've now got to the point where they're now offering us a one-time pay for, which is effectively the full fat version of it, and you can still subscribe. And I think I will, because it's beginning to move ahead a bit more. They're beginning to have an API. And there's a guy who's done something quite funky. There's a video he posted himself working in immersive doing Noda.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
So yeah, exactly. I know, but when I find a moment, I'll figure out how to extract the links from the Discord and probably put in the Twitter feed or something. But it's interesting to see. On one level, it's more beer, but I think it shows it's good to see that level of exploration going on. And I think I think that in a work context, as opposed to an entertainment context, this idea of using a what do they call it now? XR, I think extended reality.
Thank you.
It is really interesting.
Thanks. I think this is from Tesla.
Tesla.
And it is interesting. You know, I had a break-in last week, and I haven't been able.
Yeah.
They say it couldn't have been spoofed, but it clearly was because I wasn't there. But anyway, to record video on a USB, I've tried everything, so now I bought their USB stick.
Right.
It's not that overpriced, actually.
So this is your camera's getting nicked. Was this at home, or was this it was a car was this when you were away in Norway?
No, it was at my mother's place. So it was in the middle of Knightsbridge.
All right. Okay. Well, yes, Crime Central.
Yeah, it was just very, very odd.
Oh, I'm very sorry to hear that. But after your call, I discovered that not only of course, you Leica did cameras and binoculars, all attractively priced. They also do watches, which seem to be priced on application.
Yeah, I mean the issue with the car and Tesla, it is kind of relevant to our kind of general talk, because I couldn't toggle off the open door on walking close to the car.
Yeah.
And it just wouldn't toggle off. And then a few days later, after having taken a photograph of the toggle button being grayed out, suddenly it can be toggled. And now they're saying case closed. I'm trying to explain, no, it's still a bug. Just the fact that it happens still means there's a security. God. Anyway, it's all.
No, you're right. I mean, this is the sad thing with a lot of technology, where I suppose we've become such a litigious society that the idea of just saying something unexpected happened. Software contains many moving parts. We don't. If we noodle around the edges of things, we find things, don't work as they should do. And I'm always saddened the more we move away from just being able to say, I did this and something strange happened, and somebody else say, well, that wasn't expected, but I can fix that, without there being without either side taking a great sense of obligation. But that's, I guess, a throwback to 30 years back.
Yeah, exactly. So What's this hard drive here? Okay, sorry, I'm just looking at hard drives. So Carl, how are you doing?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, we just had a conference at the school and things.
Oh, you're breaking up quite a bit right now.
So there's with school and stuff, it was a real focus on equitable future and stuff. The primary thing in private sector is DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. But in the U.S. federal government, we actually are DEIA, adding in accessibility. And then there's actually a JEDI thing too, which is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So those are kind of, but yeah, I work in the area of providing technical support for people with disabilities. So it's really great that we have accessibility explicitly in there, because I spent the 90s being a accessibility evangelist, not have to spend that energy. It was really great. And then I think I've been using the Brain software for a long time, and actually have a couple of projects where the International Society for the System Sciences, I found that several people have been using it. So I'm actually going to be looking at how we can bring those together into either one thing, or have something that's like a glue or a combined user interface into multiple things. So kind of excited about that project.
Yeah, very cool. What about you, Peter? How's everything? How's your mom particularly, specifically?
She's doing pretty good. I mean, we have good days and we have bad days. It's going to take a long time for us to process losing Dad. I had a crazy dream that we were in Weekend with Bernie's, only it was Dad instead of Bernie.
Almost funny.
Yeah. But it was good because it was basically memories of being on the beach as a kid with Dad at Montauk. So
Oh, Montauk.
memories of happier times.
I love Montauk.
So you have excellent taste. Syracuse University, Montauk for summers, excellent taste.
Yeah, I remember driving to Montauk. That's it takes a while, but you know that's part of the whole thing.
The drive's half the fun.
Yeah, really is.
Especially taking the old scenic highway so that you can look out over the ocean on the way.
Yeah. Have you both been to Montauk? I think actually most likely of all of you, Fabian will be the one most likely, because Fabian, you went diving, didn't you, this weekend?
Yes, I did. Just yesterday, actually.
And how was it? It was.
It's good. It's just like it's been so long that the very beginning was a bit strange. Like you're not supposed to breathe underwater. I know it's pretty obvious, but again, it's one thing to say it and one thing to live it. And of course, after I have like 55 dives, more or less. So I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty confident underwater. But there, after 3 years without doing it, it's like, what the fuck? I shouldn't be there. So that was good. But it was nothing fancy in the sense that nothing beautiful. It's just a pool because I want to warm up before I go back to the actual sea. But it was funny because there was just me and the instructor, nobody else. You know, huge, like it's a 33 meters deep pool, so it's especially for diving or. Well, yeah, so that was strange but good. I'm alive, so.
It's fascinating because there's that article that I posted in the chat that someone posted on Facebook actually on how virtual reality can change your perspective of what you are to the point where, as you obviously know, it can be used for rehabilitation and stuff. So when you talked about being in a different physical environment, I found that was really, really fascinating because, you know, good virtual reality is almost like going diving, isn't it?
I did actually touch with that with the instructor because yeah, we talked about, I don't know how it came up, but different reality.
Sorry, it's my mother. I'll be real quick. I'm sorry. Otherwise she'll keep calling.
Carry on, Fabienne. The recording is listening.
Yes. No, I was mentioning, I forgot that. Yeah, the instructor, I don't know how it came up, but I think we were talking about relaxation or meditation and being stuck in your head, but still being in the moment. Yeah, in the end, we were discussing that it feels so real. And then we have to also, at some point, he surprised me because.
Sorry, can you repeat that? My mother, I couldn't hear a word, sorry.
Good. The instructor at some point, so because it was a refresh, because I didn't dive for 3 years, we were going back through the basics, the fundamentals, and everything was going very well, no problem, no ear problem and everything, but you need to talk underwater, and then you have some kind of sign language for it. And because I didn't practice it, I forgot everything. But then, of course, starting to be back in the same environment, it started to kick back, and I was starting to do it. But then at some point, he wanted to do some bubbles underwater. And for this, he needs to remove the breather. And then he tried to tell it to me, but there is at least no sign I know of. And then he starts to remove the breather. And I'm like, oh shit, he's trying to give me some like rescue exercise, which he shouldn't be, but I'm like, okay, I don't want him to fake die underwater. So I come close to him, like as if he was fainting. And then I go to give my breather and just like, no. And he does it 2 or 3 times and then gives up. I'm like, okay, was a bit tense and pissed at myself, but moving on. And then after that, he does it again. Like, okay, I get it, that he's trying to show me something fun, just like doing bubbles. And then when we went up out of the water, we could actually use normal language. Then we discussed about, what is virtual and what is real, because, he was just doing a simulation. He was not doing a simulation of having an attack, a panic attack or something. And then, I explained a bit that, I'm doing VR. So this boundary of what is real, what is not real, and how to distinguish it and communicate came up.
Oh,
That's really fascinating. I don't know if Brandel got the beginning of that. So you got, Brandel, that Fabienne went diving, right? That was.
And was renewing a scuba certificate or something.
Yeah, okay. Good. Then you further there. By the way, guys, I've hired someone to make the Earth. So there, ha ha ha.
I hope you give them 7 days.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I first went to TopTel because they've done work for me before. And, that's a very strange organization. So I had an initial meeting with someone. I said, look, I found an asset. Actually, I'll give you the link because it's the process I found was quite interesting. It's called Planets Earth, Mars, and the Moon. I'm pasting it in link in here. $15. So no bank was broken. And I've downloaded Unity. I've done the basic Unity introduction stuff. I'm still having problems navigating in Unity, just like I was learning Spoke. But in order to make something in Unity and have it work, you need some kind of an Android. And I don't even have a robot in the house. Actually, we do have a robot vacuum cleaner. Anyway, so it's the TopTel guy. He was quite expensive. Obviously, I don't really have any money for this. And we had a good meeting. Then the management was all a bit annoying. So then I went on Fiverr. The guy there says he can make a VR game for $200. So that's very, very interesting. So I've asked him to look at this and say, the only interaction I want to be able to move it back and forth quite slowly. That's it. Or even no interaction, but all the effort has to be about making this asset look great. And he's coming back saying, it isn't really optimized for Quest. So the things that you guys know about is becoming interesting, but also the workflow, because some of this is really easy, some of it isn't. And for us who haven't built something, we could easily get fooled, not even if they're trying to do it on purpose, but you know what I mean. So the reason I'm going to try to do it anyway is I want version 1 to be whatever the Quest can do now. But I think it's important to own the name, and I think it's important to do an app, because if I manage to get it working, even though it's going to be very reduced in quality from what we can see on here, then I'll send Vint an email saying, Vint, you wouldn't happen to know someone at NASA, would you? And then try to, something exists and we have the name Earth, and then we can start going into the things we've discussed over the last few weeks. So that's why it's being made. Just thought I'd mention it.
No, that seems reasonable. Yeah, that's the reality of virtual VR dev at the moment, is that it's very challenging to get the balance of performance and the graphical capabilities, because they're also not necessarily constrained in a way that you would expect, and so you really need to be able to kind of profile and understand what it is that you can get out of number of textures and the amount of geometry. And a lot of people do 3D but not real time, and a lot of people do 3D but not for VR, and that changes it as well, just in terms of the scale of the objects that you'll tend to be experiencing, and the various optimizations that VR hardware has been able to implement. What is the view-dependent rendering stuff that Carmack was playing with, and that is now part of most people's specs. And so, yeah, there are many snags. Unfortunately, it's not ready for it to be easy for people to use.
Oh, well, that's fine. That's what pioneering days are like. And my thinking is also, once Apple releases whatever and Meta releases Cambria, great. It'll just look better, because it'll be based on the same assets. I'm sure things have to change, but yeah. Anyway.
Just on this briefly, I don't know if I shared it here, but I'm playing also with this, which is like the state of the art in terms of hardware, the Varjo XO3. It has like a screen in a screen to be really high density in the middle. So whenever I hear things like the next Apple project or the next Meta project, I'm like, yeah, but they are targeting a specific market, which is, let's say, high-end consumers or people with access to tech, but you can still play with the future as long as you accept some other trade-off, which is first price, but then also having a cable on your back or this kind of things. So I think if we want to think of the future, what's coming next, it's more in terms of being okay, having, let's say, a super expensive and big, heavy computer, the cable and this kind of thing. So a lot of work, and I'm not saying the UX and how to make those things easy, both to sell and to play with, is trivial. Like, definitely not something I can do. But I think that the best way to prepare for the future is just spending money on fancy hardware now, because that's the kind of thing that probably in a couple of years everybody will have on their head.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, it's roughly the same as what I spent on this. But you see, this one has a special feature. It has a red dot here on the corner.
That's what you paid for. The dot is the expensive part. The rest is disposable.
What does the red dot do?
It's a Leica dot.
It says Leica. It says that I Leica the camera very much. Anyway, it's 47 megapixels, is absolutely insane. But with cameras like that, because of basically the laws of physics, with you can't whatever, it'll last a few years. I think VR headsets now won't last many years. I agree with your statement, Mark.
No, it was a quick question for Fabian. Just I sort of looked at the Varjo link you did. Is that, I mean, do you know who's using it at the moment? I'm guessing people doing sort of, I don't know, telesurgery or 3D architecture or something, or
mostly core manufacturers.
Okay.
Like they really want to see preview of whatever is going to be built, maybe some fancy architects or whatnot. So it's people who are going to have like an expensive product with a very skilled team of designers, and they run some also high-end simulation in terms of physics and whatnot. And maybe some gamers like, but because you can still use, it's a bit tricky. It's not that generalist. I mean, you usually have to build your own stack, so you need like a team of developers and not just designer behind it. But I guess some developers too who can also either develop or have a team of developers support. But yeah, and it's also just a point of comparison. That's just the headset. It means you still need like a couple of €1,000 computer behind it. You also need the tracker, the hand. You have experimental hand tracking, but you still need controllers. You still need like a Steam VR. So it's and you have like, I think, €1,000 a year license just to use it. So yeah, it's 10-15,000 per year, let's say, setup. So, but yeah, it's I have a friend who worked at some point for, I forgot, but like a car manufacturer doing design, industrial design, and they were saying, yeah, we all have this, like all the other industrial designers he knew back then were also using VR and had been for a little while now. And yeah, they are not playing with the Quest. Also because the design they show, the preview, it's going to be really high resolution, lot of like pretty good mesh, and not like, how do you say, reflection, all these kind of things is going to be fancy.
Yeah, and I can see how that also runs through a niche. So basically, if you're playing in that game, the price of getting on the ride is you just got to go out and buy the kit. No, thank you for that. I mean, the sort of the naive point behind the question was simply just thinking, okay, well, so who are the people pushing forward in that area? What are they adding to the pool of knowledge? So they're adding a lot about things like finish on cars, and I don't mean flippant in saying that, but it's not so much what they're adding; it's the areas they aren't looking at, which are things that the rest of us can consider, because they're paying top dollar to do that, and that's fine, and that's the way these things roll. But in the wider sense, it allows you to think about, okay, so what are the other areas that we need to consider that aren't being covered by that, because there are lots of things you don't need to consider when you're making a new car. But thanks for that.
One of the reasons that I'm doing the Earth is to learn more about the production workflow, because Brendel did the looking at the JSON inside an author package, and that's good stuff. So it now allows me to dream and think more about what would author and VR be more. And it's really, really hard. Really, really difficult to try to, because we can mock up a lot in Mozilla Hubs, no question about it. You can put things on walls and everything, but until it's actually live data, it becomes so abstract in a way. So this kind of thing is interesting. If we had a research money, we should go buy it immediately. By the way, have you guys, because of Noda, have you thought about doing a Zigzag in VR or other Ted Nelson data structures? Could be interesting, maybe. Or maybe useless.
So do people, hands up, do people know what Zigzag is? I mean, is this something that's familiar? Right. Well, yes, I know you know. So one of Ted Nelson's many funky ideas was, I don't know how you explain it, but it's a bit like it's like a Rubik's Cube. You can rotate on any axis, or you can rotate effectively in two. So you can either flip left, right, or up or down. And so it's like a spreadsheet on as many dimensions as you want. And it's kind of cool, but as somebody said, isn't that a bit like a triple store? And it is in a way, but a triple store hadn't been invented when Ted was thinking about these things. So I don't think his idea was, that off point. The interesting thing is I don't think anyone's actually found a really an application to make that stand up yet. Yep.
So I'll skip past the talky bit.
I love the idea of Ted, very West Coast, doing a thing about the crowned heads of Europe, but there you go.
Well, we have the crown, we have the Jubilee here. The Queen is longest serving monarch, whatever. So the thing is, the two views you're watching here are basically at right angles to each other, right, Mark?
Yes, and so you can rotate up, or you can rotate left, right, and you end up in a different. So in other words, it's not like it's
like a flattening of a
spreadsheet as you know it.
multi-dimensional space, right?
Yeah. So it's a really cool idea.
For
But
data that's properly fitting, it is actually also very useful. But the data, okay, here you can go. Here you can see more. You know, as you highlight one, you can see what's below that person, which is one thing. But the fact that you have two views at the same time, and that you can have these views rendered in many different ways, is.
And if I understood it correctly, that actually, although you see it as a sort of grid, you could, because it's effectively hypertextual underneath, you could actually link to something else. So actually, when you rotate, when you sort of spun that part of the system, you actually go off to somewhere that might be, you might be shown in a 2D view as somewhere else, but actually is next door on a different axis. So yeah, it's lovely, and this was all done before. Well, when did Ted do it? He did it in the mid-90s, I think.
Can you drop that URL in the chat?
Yes, did you see what happened there, by the way? Yeah, I'm very happy to do that.
Yeah, but it's one of those things people name check, and I know it's really interesting. And the thing I take from it is, okay, well,
Thanks.
with the tech that we've actually built now, because in a sense this is a conceptual demo. With what we have now, can we actually leverage that? And I think sort of we can. Plus the fact that if you think in an XR environment, well, you know, you're not bound by the limitations of a two-dimensional interface. So that's also very interesting. So if you step away from what does it look like from the moment, but you just hang on to the concept of, but I can get to there from here, then I think it's quite interesting.
I did some demos with them, recorded some quite a while ago, but I'm not sure. He did one in a coffee shop that was really beautiful. Why are all these coming up when I search for Ted? Here's Doug. Oh. Well, anyway. So how are you, Brandel? We've gone through everyone well, except you, so please.
I'm well. I've been chasing conversations about how Apple works on the future of the web, and it sounds like I'll be able to help. So that's nice.
That is very good. Did I tell you guys that my old good friend Bruce Horn is back at Apple?
You mentioned that's really neat. I don't know that I've spoken with him, but it's really cool to hear. He's joining the AI department.
Yes, he will be back next month. Is his first day, and he will be doing Siri AI in lots of different areas. He'll be spending the first few months, getting to know who does what within AI at Apple. But I do look forward to conversations with him about AI multiplied by VR. So that'll be fun. Yeah. Oh, spreadsheets and VR. Yeah, that's.
But while we're at it, because Monday, I think Fabian and I riffed on some things unrecorded because it didn't happen because people were away. But he brought up the point, and really this is more for Brandel. I sent some stuff out about the NARX, the big some data about the big video thing.
Oh yeah. I'm
very conscious that what it doesn't have is any sensible way to tie it to the source substrate, and because it wasn't recorded. But Fabian and I had a sort of useful chat, and he gave me some ideas. And what I thought maybe I should do is take a very small part of the PDF, and look at some ways that we might think about doing that, or seeing what that might look at as SVG or something. Because the thing is, the source document is a moment in time. It was done in 2004. and it's 2004 tech. And we can complain all we like about what it does or doesn't have. And were we doing it now? Well, it's out of Illustrator. Maybe it looks no different. But the interesting thing is that if I was building it now, even say I was doing it in Creative Suite, would it actually give a UID to all the elements in it? Probably not, because why would it? Because so many of our creative tools are completely mired in the past. They basically think they're doing digital print or digital print, but actually that's just print on a screen. It goes nowhere, and that's not a canard against the tech. It's just that it's a lack of vision to say that, okay, no, I might want to do other things with this. I might actually need to know this caption, or these 4 separate elements of SVG, whatever, are actually one unit. So in other words, this is the caption to that, and so things that look visually different. If you would, so this is when I deconstructed it. What I took all little bits of text, and I sort of extract them where I could, and a lot of them I had to retype because the way the PDF, because when you try and select text, it just won't. And that's fine. Yeah. That's cool. That's all part of the fun of data munging, which I'm used to. But it did make me reflect on, okay, if I was doing this again, if I was writing this, even on a smaller level, what do I want to do? Even if I myself don't want to use it in this for something else, but if I want to be mindful of the environment of today, that somebody else might want to do something with it, what's the minimum that I have to do to make a meaningful digital asset? So that I can give you something which to me is something maybe that I only ever see printed on a piece of paper or projected on a screen as a picture, but actually contains a vast amount of data. And not only that, but one of the things, as I deconstructed it, I found about 30, 40 references that go out to things that could themselves, if I were, say, bothered, be traced out to actual real references. In other words, I just picked out things that lots of notes referred to, and then made another data object for that. But of course, there's no URL at the end of that, because I haven't the time or the need at this point. But it speaks to this point that text and VR. This to me is a lot of what it's about. So I don't expect the people sitting in Redmond making the next version of Word to be thinking about this, because no one's paying them money to do it, and why should they? But I do think we need to think about this, and it's probably, funnily enough, it hits more in things like visual tools, because Illustrator still does a lot of heavy lift unseen in the background.
Yeah,
it's a frightening thing to find that nearly all the visual. I sort of found this following the sort of data visualization sort of strands on Twitter and things, is that all the really nice pictures you've seen that are made by software have actually been retouched, which is amazing, which is both obvious and depressing at the same time. I understand why.
Hang on, what do you mean all has been retouched?
So when you see this wonderful sort of, spider graph of, you just look at it and you think, wow, I want to do that. I want my information to look like this picture I've just seen. The depressing thing is that the picture you saw isn't actually the picture on the system that was described. Someone's taken that,
yes,
and then moved all pieces around and not in a deceitful way. They're trying to make.
But I think that is an inherent issue in what that kind of visualization is, because what's the name of the guy with the pump in Soho? Forget it. Jon Snow. So,
oh yeah.
You probably all heard about him to some degree. There was a smallpox or
cholera map.
Cholera, thank you. Outbreak in Soho over 100 years ago. He went around finding out where people were drinking water. His idea was that it would have been from a dirty pump. And by mapping where people lived, he got a nice graph. And then he went to the pump that he believed was the reason. And he cut the handle off. And then he presented a beautiful graph of all the people where they lived. That graph was presented afterwards. It was a justification. It wasn't how he found the information. So I think what you're talking about now is really, really important, because also when I work in my own knowledge maps, they're always suboptimal, they're always disappointing, but they are like my messy table for thinking. When you present it to someone else, you're absolutely right. It becomes a very different thing. And it's really, really important to keep that in mind.
Well, yes and no, just briefly come back on that. I mean,
Oh, yes, and no, all at once.
All right. In saying that, I wouldn't want anyone to think that I was just dissing the people who are doing this. I don't there's any dishonesty in what they're doing.
I'm not taking it as
they're
a
trying to
bit.
give clarity. What it says, but the point I take about in this forum is how immature our tools are, because people aren't continuing to innovate. So we have a strata of very, very mature tools that are not continuing to innovate because they are effectively, they're at the moment still hardwired to print or a digital version thereof. So they're not thinking through the fact that the artifact I create today is just a single manifestation of the same underlying data set. And until we move beyond that, I think it will be quite difficult to make the progress we need.
What do you think the progress should be then? I'd like to hear that, because I would love that for that to be progress, but my concern is it may almost be inherent.
I don't pretend to know the answer, and I hope I didn't make an unintended broadside there. I mean, because I'm intensely respectful of many skills that I don't have.
Mark, I don't think anyone is taking it. We're not taking it as a criticism. When you talk about broadside and things like that, I am saying that I think it's maybe even inherent in visual thinking that it's messy.
Yes.
Well, so I think you two are sort of touching on different things. What it sounded like Mark was saying is that the sort of the representation of these beautiful data visualizations as though they're coming from AI or from digital systems is not entirely correct, in the sense that it tends to have somebody beautifying and prettifying things. What Freud is talking about is the difference between tools, the views that people use to do their thinking versus the kinds that they need to be able to display it to other people afterward. And that's sort of because of the contrast between what can be understood about in that creative kind of space in which people are actually doing their computation and working. So they're both important points, but slightly unrelated to each other. The thing that I would say about the tools is that that we don't have an appropriate manipulation space for those artifacts in such a way that we can maintain their semantic relevance. And that's the crux of the issue for me, is that when you have something that, so for example, I build a lot of stuff that generates SVGs. When they're SVGs on my side, they have a lot of information in them about why they are what they look like. When those things are then imported into something like Illustrator, then all of that information necessarily has to be blown away, unless it's in some weird clandestine kind of sort of smuggling of that data through an invisible text field inside it or something. But it's definitely going against the grain of tools. And then if you start doing stuff with something like Photoshop, then that compounds it, and you have to do some very strange things indeed to be able to get information to stay through there. So most people don't. So I think that the point for me is that, like when you have information, the places where you can tweak and lean on how it appears are much more limited. And so there's this lossy process whereby once you start sort of imagining something as existing primarily for presentation, you start to have to take over the job of saying, well, this is how the information in it is represented, and here is where I'm responsible for the appearance. And the document itself is no longer capable of containing that representation or maintaining the fidelity of it. And I do think that's a really big issue. I sent some feedback to the folks involved in Figma just during their private beta about some of the concepts that have been floating around in WIST, the User Interface Software and Technology Conference, for a few years about maintaining the sort of semantic integrity of what it is that a document is. They weren't interested at the time, and I mean I understand that it's hard, but it's tricky. Because you like knowing that a specific grouping of things in Illustrator is related or not, and the idea of things like the fact that there's a single universal global Z order inside an Illustrator document. It's just like I mean, it's true, but this is Z order 257 and this is 392. isn't actually that important if all of the stuff between them is over here. Yeah, it's how the sort of the relatedness between what an object looks like and what an object means is something that is so far beyond the realm of most people's imagination in building these tools right now that the kind of work that you're doing, Mark, is kind of off on its own in terms of what kind of challenges.
Well, you put it more eloquently than I
tools.
could have.
One of the interesting aspects between the difference between the active thinking and the presentation stage. I mean, you see, Mark, please, for clarity, I completely agree with your point, and I think it's really worth probing further. And I'm just thinking about TV shows, murder walls. When you put things up on a wall to try to solve a problem, you don't know the solution, obviously. So that means you will make it messy. Some of it will be wrong. And once in your head, there is a solution, generally you can just stop working and tear it down. But if you then need to convince someone else, it becomes a separate artifact that needs, maybe you have to write headings over sections or put arrows, or you have to then make it understandable.
Well, yes, I mean, there's the other thing of, I mean, to me, the best example of messy data is dates. On a human level, we cope with someone saying 1901. It doesn't worry us which millisecond from the Unix epoch that point in 1901 was. We're just quite happy it's a year. And we're struggling to make computers catch up with that. And again, that's not to be unkind, because all these things are hard. And I don't know, and there are various solutions to it, but this messiness, you said, yes, I've got a thing that's broadly this shape. And it will be the same. Well, this is one of the things to me, this is where it maps across actually the interesting thing about spatial hypertext, which is when somebody asks me to explain it, to me, it's a bit like a jigsaw. You just empty out all the pieces. And you've got a one-sided jigsaw, because that's easier than two-sided, because at least if you turn the pieces the right way up, you know that you're in the ballpark. And maybe if you put the corner pieces there and you put the edge pieces away, you're beginning to get some structure. But these are really, really loose things. I mean, the edge pieces are just, you're doing that because it's probably a straight side, unless it's a shaped jigsaw, in which case it's a lot more fun. But we deal with that quite well, in a way at the moment that a lot of our programming doesn't. And I think this goes back. This speaks back to your sort of messiness, and you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with messy. And indeed, the thing that makes me sort of just cry gently when I read so many papers that start by saying, I just took, oh my God, no, you didn't. You just ran a query and you didn't even check what you got back. Yeah, so it's a challenge. And I don't pretend for a moment to know the answer, but I think it's something that we shouldn't obsess over, but we shouldn't lose sight of. Because if we do, we just fall into a very hard-edged world that will lead us into all sorts of wrong conclusions.
That's why I'm really excited by Jim Holland's emphasis on context restoration and on the necessity to be able to see the steps that you yourself or other people have undertaken in a context over data. Because I think that messiness is only messy when you are not entitled to the context that gave rise to that messiness. I mean, it can still be overwhelming, but just when you see somebody put lines down on a piece of paper, then what it is that drawing is just much more interesting. And in a lot of my sort of algorithmic drawing and things, I made a couple of things that I've called autobaroque, because I like the name. And a lot of the time they're beautiful as the marks are being made, but once you see the finished product, it doesn't actually land the same way, because you don't get to see the the graceful shape of the curlicues coming in, and you just see the places where the symmetry is matched and things like that. And yeah, it's really interesting to reflect on the difference between a single sort of final snapshot of something versus what goes into it. And I think that it would be really nice for people to demonstrate views, for example, in academic papers with some kind of representation of how it comes in, how a space gets built. And it doesn't necessarily need to reflect every misstep, every blind alley, but at least some notion of how that complexity gets layered in, I think would be exceptionally valuable. It would be really, but to that end, I think it's essential for people to build tools that foreground the concept of history and a creative sort of process as an essential artifact of what it is that a document even is. And the sort of the impoverished environment, a memory environment that we tend to expect that our computing systems were sort of reared within, has made that sort of the application design at odds somewhat with what the needs of an application are for being able to kind of preserve and elevate this concept of production and creation as a process rather than as something that has all eyes on the final outcome.
When it comes to academic, I've had some incredible support from Vint Cerf and others over the last decade plus. And even though I now have a PhD in this, in metadata and stuff, even though I have access to the top people at ACM Publishing, to even get the basic citation data into a document has been an absolute struggle. And I think, obviously I will keep working on it. It's very, very important. But talking to my main advisor, Dave Millard, a few weeks ago after this, I said, okay, I'm now going to be focusing on my software, blah, blah, blah. What do you think of this messaging to teachers? And he said, forget teachers. They're not going to recommend your software because it's too much of a risk for them. What if it doesn't work or a student doesn't understand something? Why would they want to, promote something that isn't the standard? So when it comes to having the kind of thing you talked about, it's really, really important. But maybe it's not the place to look into academia. Maybe it's more to look at the people like us. In other words, the tools for thought crowd, which may or may not be in academia. Because as a small example, big for me, but small in general, now that I have to edit my own big paper, 67,000 words, I get lost. It's on all these gray columns. So the thing that I've done is that if you select text and then highlight it, when you then fold into an outline, the highlighted text appears. That's a really important thing. And I'm not just suddenly going into a product thing. The reason it's important is Mark has been helping me thinking about how that should look. And that's a very interesting discussion in itself. But it turns out we'll just do a white, almost like a piece of tape is over it. So it's relatively subtle. But the reason I'm mentioning it to you now is when I had a similar thing quite a long time ago, where we highlighted stuff in the document and then exported it, and was highlighted for the author, Vint Cerf said that he would like to see what the author thought was important. So what I would like to do when I can afford the programming with Jacob or somebody is that this highlighted stuff, which currently will not be exported because it's really messy, it should go in the visual meta. So if reader software wants to, it should be able to show this is what the author kind of summarized in a different way, because it's a genuine summary, because you're summarizing based on what is there, rather than ACM keywords, which is very often what we call nonce, as in they really don't mean anything. So in terms of through visual meta, I know you weren't talking about it, but obviously that's kind of my interest, but through some means to help an author make a richer presentation for reading through VR or layouts or whatever, I think that is hugely important. Just very hard to get into academia. Yeah, Mark.
Sorry, just before that, Carl said he's got to leave. Thanks, Carl. Thanks for coming along with those really neat sort of additions to the conversation.
Okay.
I like.
I didn't want to really disrupt the thought too much, but yeah, that Venn diagram is so helpful. It's finding somebody who has an accurate one, because all the ones that are being used out there only have 13 of the 15 regions, and then ad hoc stuff I just love and stuff. So, and that AR thing from 6 years ago blew me away with the AR headset. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. So thank you.
So what made me stick my hand up was, and this isn't a counterpoint to what Fred was saying, was I picked on things there. So and he said, Vint said to me, well, I'd like to know what was important and what you thought was important. And I'm thinking, I sort of had two thoughts at once. One is, this is good hierarchical thinking. I've been a staff officer writing reports that go all the way up to ministerial level, and they're all shaved down, and it's very different to writing freely about what you think. But in a wider sense, I find myself coming back to provenance, which links back to what Brandel was saying about, okay, so you have this thing in a document, but what is it, and then that your sense of like different Z orders between different things, and to me that's really important. I mean, I ironically and entirely accidentally, by having just been an information plumber for some years, where I was moving basically crap from A to B where supposedly no link existed, and part of the job was I wasn't supposed to drop anything on the floor. Part of the discipline was, therefore, I didn't get to decide whether it made sense or not. I just had to get it from A to B. But of course, what you were asked to what was described to you is, well, it's just one of these. And of course, it transpired invariably to not be just that, and it was messy and didn't fit any of its starting parameters. But theory of constraints, where you work inside what you've got and you go with it. But it's made me very sensitive to provenance. It's really interesting that the paper that I'm presenting at Hypertext this year, which sounds rather boring on the surface, is just about, okay, some information about what was in Hypertext. What it sits atop is a hand-curated data set I've made of 32 years of the conference, where I've gone back and I've actually taken all the errors out of the DLACM, off which everything else builds. Because and what was really interesting, everyone said, well, why didn't you just use name of algorithm? Well, because they used the source, and the source is incorrect. The source is incorrect because the OCR is crap. But there's no way for, even as a member of the ACM, to sort of say, I found a mistake in this. These are my bona fides, which are important. I'm not just some random guy, doing a bit of log rolling for my QDOS and I want something. So I found a mistake. And I think it's important that, I mean, again, it worried me that people, when what happens is you write them, eventually someone comes back and says, oh, yes, thanks for that, we'll fix it. And it worries me slightly that no one's come back and said, who are you? And not in an unfriendly way, but just said, look, I understand that, and understand you said that, but your sort of, your reason for saying this is, yeah, because I understand this.
But Mark, that's an issue with some serious history, though, of how it's possible to change data or metadata. How do they do it in library paper days? Like if there was something wrong with the index card or something.
Well, presume it would in the Data Central things, then it would have percolated up at some point. When you used to mail out library cards to subordinate libraries, I imagine that the master record was changed, and the sort of, well, master slavers were not allowed to call it now, but it would percolate all the way down through the library system. But the interesting thing is, going back to this thing, and I'm thinking on, because I'm busy sort of thinking on writing the presentation, which is the fun part of giving a paper rather than the PDF which you and your mum will only ever read, is that It's the provenance. What really shocked me is there's been endless talking in the 6 years or something I've made this data set. Endless talking, or why bother and who cares? And also, or why didn't you write a bit of software to do this? I said, well, because A, no one knew what the problem was, and B, I'm not a programmer, and C, well, how do you write a bit of software when you don't know what the task is?
Mark, this is probably.
But no, just a second. And so I followed through this messy thing. But one of the things that I've really worked hard at was trying to keep the provenance of where the mistakes came from. Because at any point, and this goes back to the point that when you see the beautifully manifested thing at the end, which may or may not be the case, that being able to go back from that and say, right, this is this version of this. Because we all like to think that we're, well-intentioned, never make mistakes and all this sort of thing, but we do. So I like to try and think of it that I'm as fallible as anybody else, and I make as many mistakes as anybody else. So what can I do to back that up? So the provenance is really, really important. That's one of the things that attracted me with the virtual meta, is some way to have some with the principle of the possibility of errata, to have a reasonably self-healing system. Fred.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that, this is when you're saying percolating up, the question is, where is up today? Who, like with ACM, who was responsible for updating the records and so on? It's annoying, I know, but
Amazon delivery truck.
yeah, I'm going to mute Mr. Peter. Anyway, I'm sure. Just lots of aspects. I still haven't gotten the transcript back from the last presentation because our friend who does the transcription, his mother-in-law just died, so that's putting problems there. We should also probably start inviting people to write articles if they want, because that'll be for the book. That's something obviously Mark and I can take a lead on, but if there is someone you think might want to contribute something, please say so. And also these Monday, Friday meetings are very pleasant. I'm sorry about the last two, but they are also a complete mess, which they should be. So I think maybe we should focus a little bit more on the monthly meetings, not sitting talking about how to do them, social thing ad nausea. But if you have someone you would like to present, or if you'd like to present, like Randall, you're supposed to, Fabian.
I'm supposed to.
Let's do that, because at the end of the year, I'm pretty sure you all agree, let's not just have we talked for a year. There's got to be a work product, right? And that, even if it's just those videos and transcripts, I think that's really worthwhile contribution to the field. I don't know, what do you all feel about that? This is not one of those what are we doing here things. It's just a brief look.
Yeah, I think that the presentations have been really good. I mean, I really enjoyed Andrea's presentation and pulling in some of those concepts. I think that having my question would be for the people who are more focused specifically on the sort of their understanding of text, whether it sort of fits the bill. Because there have been a number of times when people bring people into something like an AI conversation, and that person is AI ethics and bleeds into just pure ethics, and that's fun for me, but not necessarily fit for the forum. I think those are good, and if we have more people lined up, then that's excellent. I might actually, in order for me to do a presentation, I might need some help thinking about how to do that, because for the most part, what I've presented in the past has been not mechanical, like technical, in terms of being really specifically about computer graphics or proceduralism, rather than anything as actually philosophical. And I mean, I hope from what we've had the ability to communicate about in this forum, you can see that it's worth probably trying to talk about some of the philosophy, but it's not something that I know sort of reflexively how to do. So I'd love to do that, and I think that it would be valuable if I could just get it out of my head. But I have so far been really struggling with trying to figure out how to put that together.
Well, these
Yeah.
meetings now are only semi-public. They're no longer linked to from our websites. We don't do transcripts from all of them. I stopped doing that around the time of the initial land because I didn't want people to read about stuff that wasn't agreed. Plus, there was some internal strife, so to speak. So yeah, I also didn't want any partners to come in and look at all of that stuff. So maybe what we could do, Brandel, and this could be a model going forward. Let's say that on Monday or Friday, whenever, it is your day to rough present to us. So, you know, you talk about stuff, we have dialogue, we do it as structured or unstructured as you want, but it becomes either just brainstorming or almost finished presentation, whatever. And then we make a different one, which is for you to present to the normal audience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds really appealing, as long as other people don't feel like that's a waste of their time. Then I'd really appreciate that.
Well, yeah, I think I'm glad to see Mark doing a thumbs up, because one of the conversations we had recently, at the end of it, when we were talking about doing an app thing in VR, and you know, with the card, when you said, oh, you know, coding for the other hand, not just one hand, and then to be able to, you know, like things that we wouldn't have thought about. So I know that's a particularly technical thing, but it's really worthwhile to get that on the record properly. And then, you know, Andrea, she went really, really deep. Ted Nelson was annoyed it wasn't lots of visuals for architecture, but I'm very grateful that she covered what she covered. So yeah, I think that would be really, really good. Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was ready to sort of say that, I mean, and reflecting slightly on what Brindle said, I mean, part of the joy of this is, I still very much live in the world of kindness to strangers. You know, I've never, all my technical training, well, I have no technical training. It's what I've learned along the way. And so I don't mind turning up and you know, understanding the half of it. Half of the joy is understanding there are people who understand things that I don't. And the real benefit is to understand that things I thought were simple or trivial are not, and that I should be mindful of that. If I'm going to do anything that is non-trivial. And that's really important. So just exposing these things, I just find it remarkably informative. I've learned so much in the, you know, the time that we've been doing this. Will I be able to do it myself? Probably not, but that's not the point. And at worst, it'll help me to stop somebody else who might do something bad from doing something bad. So you know, so it's not time wasted, and I absolutely get what's sort of shining through from what Brandon says, because it's another form of imposter syndrome. What could I possibly know that is really, you know, of note? And I think it's the wrong way to look at it. I know stuff, and you know, the worst that can happen is someone said, well, we knew all that, but that's so unlikely. So I think the answer is to just dive in and do it.
Yeah,
and
it's
a friendly
well, but my anxiety is not that what I would be saying is obvious. It's kind of more what Andrea was fretting about as well, is veering into areas in which she's not an expert, because there's a lot about cognitive neuroscience that's essential to the thesis that I very much have not studied at a tertiary level. My friends have talked to me about it, and they're in sort of mild support, but they're also much more sort of conservative in terms of what they think cognition is. So yeah, it's more to do with what's worth saying and what people, yeah. But yeah, no, I'd love to. I mean, you do more or less know what it is that I would put together in terms of the momentary pieces of what embodied cognition, extended mind are, and how it relates to what we do with our bodies to do thinking, and what kind of implications might flow from that for computing. But yeah, it's a matter of having it all sort of run together in a big series of oral paragraphs.
But the distillation does matter in a sense, because on one level it's just saying some stuff, but it's an important distillation because, you know, a sad reality of the world is that lots of things don't happen until some bored person in a sharp suit says, oh, right, so if I throw a bucket load of money at this, will I be rich? You know, and that's not the way we want the world to work, but it kind of is. So surfacing things that need to be surfaced and them being understood, you know, through the repetition, I just think is absolutely wonderful, because eventually this turns into something that somebody in that sort of meeting can understand and said, right, okay, I'm going to double down on this and let's do it. And it does to me as part of this thing. I don't. It doesn't bother me if I'm the person who, you know, gets rich off it. That's not really the point of doing it. It's the knowledge. It's moving things in the right direction, I guess. Moving the needle in the right direction is what matters.
Oh, speaking of getting rich off of something, has anybody read or got Pieces of the Action by Vannevar Bush? I just heard about it. An autobio from Vannevar Bush. He published in 1970. It's been out of print, so there's a copy on Amazon, on eBay for $1,400. There are some PDFs I think around, but he was talking about the Pieces of the Action. But I love, as much as, you know, he has to answer for being responsible for Raytheon, bringing Raytheon into the world. I have quite a high opinion of Vannevar Bush. So I think, as we may think, was a pretty decent starting point for a lot of people. So I'm really fascinated in trying to pick it up and play with it and get through it. But one of the things he says about patents is that it's not for inventors; it's for bankrolling inventors. It's for people to be able to have the confidence that if they fund an inventor, then they'll be able to get money from it. But it's not something that would ever particularly motivate the inventor themselves.
It's interesting, as you're keen on Bush, is that it's a monograph, it's over there, I'll find it out, is that one of the things I didn't understand is that everyone talks about this being done in the end of 1945, you know, as we may think. He actually wrote most of that before the war. So I'm in two minds about it. So in other words, this wasn't the crucible of the World War that formed the view. The interesting thing also is it's not clear what it was that formed the view. It's so interesting that he had it.
Was he familiar with La Fontaine and Utley?
Well, academically, there are some people pursing of lips over the fact that Bush was somewhat limited in his referencing of others. So we don't really know what he thought. There is a book. Well, one second. Sadly, the folks at Elsevier will charge you all the money in the world, well, it's £30 or something, with no discounts. But it's called From Memex to Hypertext, which is where I found this, which was a number of people, including Ted and I think Doug as well, writing about this in about 1991. I'll put a link in the sidebar when finished talking. 1991, it was published. This is a fresh digital copy because it's out of print. So the only way you can find it is by a nice, expensive modern digital print. But it is interesting. They were talking about the fact that he had these ideas some while earlier. But as I say, he did not cite people. So it's quite hard to know where it comes from. But well, you might find interesting. Somebody else might find this interesting. I'll find the details.
But by the way, kind of an aside, going back a little bit, just a brief question. In Quest, the YouTube player is quite good. It's a big screen and everything. But do you know of a video player that allows you to have a completely black background? Because if so, we should be able to test rendering a really high quality Earth, flat, black background, viewed in a black room that should give the highest possible visual quality you can now, even though it'll be flat, right?
So the issue there is that when you're playing a video, that's very different to what you're doing when you're looking at a 3D object of an Earth. In the same way that you can watch Lord of the Rings. Well, Lord of the Rings is pretty long in the tooth now, but you know, most film sequences that I think was it Ed Catmull has a Catmull's laws that a frame will always take an hour to render.
Mhm.
He's one of the Pixar folks. And a lot of the curves are named after him. Catmull Ron, Catmull Clark, and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, so you have the ability to create beautiful things that are exceptionally expensive to produce the first time that you can then relay. The challenge with you know, most movies, I can't think of up-to-date movies, so I guess Avatar 2, because it's coming out soon. You know, it's free to show that frame. That's exactly what you have right now. It's exceptionally expensive to try to get one just to the left. That said, there are now technologies. There's one's called Google Seurat. Have you played with it, Fabian? It's pretty interesting. Where you Seurat, the artist, and what they've done is created a series of depth and distance fields similar to neural radiance fields in ERF. Where you can take footage or some synthetic scene rendered and then turn it into something where you have at least a limited range of movement where you can kind of move your head around. And my brother's friend Paul Debevec has been done a lot of really interesting stuff. He's now at Netflix and creating things that are renderable on lower fidelity, lower power devices, but making use of a very, very large amount of power on the back end to be able to create things that you and get a limited amount of head track parallax to.
Right.
Funny.
Are you able to, hang on, I'm just looking at the link that Fabian put up there. Oh, okay, interesting. So if you, Brandel, with the equipment you have, could you take that asset and just render it spinning 360 degrees for the black background and save that as a 4K video on Dropbox, and then we put it in an environment to see how that looks? Because there is a video of the Earth spinning from space that is complete, entire Earth on YouTube that I can find.
Really interesting. Well, so I mean, if one was to do a video, then it wouldn't end up being stereo, for one thing. And
what?
if it would be monoscopic if you render a video,
absolutely.
unless you intend to make a stereoscopic image.
But also,
then once it becomes.
But also the thing is that the Earth is huge, right? And one of the problems we have with this super modeling thing is we can easily change things that you can't do in the world, which is great for some data stuff, but for other things, if it is literally locked quite far in front of you, huge, then the parallax effect, you'd have to move really, really far to even properly notice that it isn't a 360 sphere. So it may do the job in terms of the feeling of, oh.
Yeah, but so parallax is not a function of scale as is to distance. So if something doesn't exhibit parallax, then that's equivalent to being infinitely distant. We actually, I made a murder mystery game with a great big robot for capturing live scenes many years ago, in 2007, where we built rooms and then put a 360 camera on a robot arm to be able to take several 100,000 photos of it to be able to stitch together the MPEGs of it. Well, one of the things, I don't know if we ended up doing it, but I realized would be really fun to do is, in order to simulate having a skybox or a distant image in it, attaching an additional piece to the robot arm for scenery, because as long as it moves with the camera, then it's infinitely distant. So if you just have a piece of paper here, then it's as though it's some scene that's far away. So if something is large but it's close, then you will experience parallax. You'll be able to move.
Yeah,
and
Yeah, yes, but if you are literally in a spaceship and you're far enough that the Earth is in your field of view, like 2-3 meters wide, which would mean very, very far away, you're not going to experience parallax.
No, yes, that's true. That's true. If the entirety of the Earth is discernible, then it's going to be distant enough that you wouldn't have any stereo effects and you wouldn't have any parallax effects. That's quite true.
So are you able to do because of the way you do you did the amazing library, are you able to render this Earth? You remember the library when we were doing Linnean?
Oh, that yeah, I mean that was just a Blender. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, all you do is set up an orbit and then a render of it. I'm very surprised there isn't stock footage of that kind of thing already available, because it's the sort of thing that people will tend to put in documentaries and things like that.
Yeah, me too. If you find it, and I just missed it, because I've been sitting with my wife in the evening, just looking at the projector and going through again and again. There's many amazing ones where you can see this, that, or the other, but there's no from one spot.
Yeah, I guess people have made them all a lot more interesting, which means that they're a lot more opinionated.
Yeah. Okay. So as a really interesting perspective, at least from my side, if you click on the asset in the App Store, excuse me, in our chat, that's something that you could put into Unity, that one there, right? Because when I put it in, I didn't have much control because I don't know what I'm doing, but it looks absolutely freaking amazing.
I think one has to be cautious with this, with a kind of, I don't know, candy store, or there are a lot of things that are, as we discussed before, not ready for real time. So if it's about showcasing an idea, I think rendering it as a video so that anybody or most people who might be interested would get the concept might be good enough, because to do the optimization to make something especially gorgeous on entry-level hardware, which the Quest is,
No, but
it's
Fabio,
super challenging.
that's not what we're doing. We're cheating. What we're going to do, yeah. Oh, sorry, were you just agreeing with me? I'm not used to that. Sorry.
No, but it's sitting, it's cutting corners, and that means, yeah. But what's the perspective that people are not going, like being a magician, basically, like driving the attention of the person so that they're only looking at what you want them to look at, not peeking around corners or.
But this is why it's so fascinating to have this discussion with you and Brandel, because you guys know too much. I'm coming at it from a really, really naive perspective on purpose. So the idea is you put your headset on, the Earth is at a distance, you can't move to it. You know, we'll render it, it'll be in the space maybe 100 meters away. So even if you do move a bit, it won't matter that much. And all it is a normal 4K video playing inside a room with a black background. The room is completely black, and that's it. It's just so you get that feeling of looking at the Earth from space in a photo real way, not as in a plastic globe way. That's it. Because this guy I found on Fiverr, he's happy to build a basic video player because the YouTube ones have all this kind of stuff on the side, which would ruin the immersion.
Using WebXR again, you have video basically for free. Even in Spoke, you can have a video as an asset.
No. Yeah, no. What Fred is asking for is a video, like to be able to show in whatever context. He's saying, can we do a full rotation of the Earth as a high fidelity video? I can't tell whether the Unity assets would be appropriate to be able to pull into Blender, which is where I would tend to do that work for the. But actually, on reflection, I'm not sure how hard it is to get a good enough Earth looking in Blender. Anyway, it's not super challenging. You just have a couple of layers of things, and it starts to look pretty fancy. Because I've done it before for TV documentaries and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure that if I were to look back at the footage, I would shudder, and as would the people who paid me. But yeah, it's not. It's fairly well-known sort of sources of things to be able to play with.
Because
That'd be really great. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say that. Okay, just to give you my background with video, one app that I built quite a while ago, it does a 3D scan of your face, but of course it doesn't. All it does when you're told to scan, and when you do the scan, it's just producing a video that gets converted into frames. So with the motion of the phone, when you move it, it plays the video forwards or backwards. It starts in the middle. So that gives a really realistic impression that it's a 3D photo. I've shown it to 3D professors here in London, and they asked me which scanning technique, and I told them it's basically a gimmick, right? So that's the approach that I'm doing here. When you talked about magician, you know, what you show and what you don't show is exactly the point. It's a completely non-interactive experience. But what we can do, sorry, the reason I said that is, so imagine we do the video and it's 360, the sun is always here and it spins around. We can then still, if we time code the video properly, with a little bit of cleverness, what we can do is when you put the headset on, it'll play from that moment where the sun is right now. Right, so that'll give a sense of some kind of reality to it. Still just a video.
Just dropped a few links of interest into the chat. Currently, there's a page with a whole catalog of Blender models of the Earth.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very cool.
The ice dock, is that, it's not very realistic, this one, Fabian. It's
I've never been out of Earth, so I don't really have a good point of comparison, unfortunately.
yes, you have. You've been in an airplane, and that really helps.
Pretty close still.
But no, the reason I'm saying it is when I was just beginning of this, I had to go pick up my mother in Norway, as you know, and just sitting in a plane, like, okay, I'm going to look down now and see with a little bit of atmosphere, how does it look? And it was very interesting. Yeah, I see the turbo squids. Yeah, there are definitely several good Earths here as well, in addition to the one on the Unity Asset Store, absolutely. The Unity Asset Store, though, what really made me excited about it is the way it renders the atmosphere. Because in terms of the environmental message, you know that if you shrink the Earth to the size of a football, the breathable atmosphere will be the thickness of a piece of paper. You know, so we can see other fuzziness, but you can't breathe there. But to really bring home that, it does quite well.
So I'm not an astronomer or geophysicist or anything of the sort, but I'm pretty sure there is like a little asterisk over there that says like artistic rendition or something, because when we go to the actual NASA or ESA website, yeah, there are a lot of, I don't want to, it's going to sound pretty bad, but a lot of it's pretty boring when you look at it the way it actually is. So all those things that and also I was worried when you showed this asset, because usually if it's just a 3D model with a texture, that atmospheric effect, maybe they had like another semi-transparent sphere on it with another texture, or maybe just not there, and the render that they use to sell the asset, I'm always worried about this, that it's not the full thing. Maybe they add some VFX on top, maybe
I've seen it.
like lens flare or whatnot.
I have installed Unity on my machine. I've rendered it. It looks absolutely amazing. I just don't have enough Unity experience to actually frame it, believe it or not.
But then you can use another software. If you manage to render it, you can record your screen.
Yes, but no, absolutely, that would be fine. But I can't actually frame it properly. Just to, like learning it,
Yeah.
it was hard enough. But here, it just, my brain has, if I have someone sit down and teach me the camera, this, the globe, that, it just doesn't fit my brain. So
Actually, another thing you might be able to access, Fred, is I know that through sort of Dave's link with, Charlie and guys who are doing, I know they're all doing game stuff, but they're doing a lot of Unity. So you may just find, although they may not be specifically focused on 3D per se, that's somewhere else you could probably pick up some, lean on, people give you tips of Unity. And I was just thinking, listening to Fabian's comment, that this sort of comes back to provenance, and not to be that guy, but I mean, it's just interesting because in a sense, yes, you do always have to keep asking yourself, well, what am I seeing? Which is an entirely separate question to what you're trying to do. And I do think most of the time they need to live in separate boxes, because as long as what you're doing is not harmful to what you're trying to achieve, it doesn't matter if you are making some elisions or you're making certain choices. It's more that having your own ethical black box running in the background. So, wait a minute. Now, when I made this point, I now need to put something back in to say, right, I've done the following things to get here. It's not bad, and they're not bad things. It's just this difficult thing. You don't know what you don't know. And the moment I take something from somebody else, which I believe to be an absolute truth, and then find out it wasn't quite what I thought it was, then we get subpar result.
what are you specifically referring to?
No, I was making a general point because you're probably right, thinking I'm just trying to make a claim, and you're right. But Fabian's point was that, okay, so the render you see might not be, there might be other bits to it that you're not getting.
But Mark, I've seen it on my own computer. It looks absolutely amazing. It's just that when it renders, it's kind of at the top of the screen and it's spinning. And if someone wanted to teach me Unity sitting over my shoulder, that would be really, really useful. But it's definitely.
So you can use your digital Sharpie plugin to do the hurricane loop.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, I mean, I have done enough Unity to be dangerous, so I can show you how to use it and things like that if there's a specific thing that that you want to get out of it. Like I said, yeah, if it's a Unity asset, it's not necessarily a Blender asset, and typically if people are making things for games, then a lot of the stuff that they'll be building are specifically shaders that run in the way that the Unity runtime does, which means that it wouldn't translate immediately over to Blender or somewhere where you would be doing your offline rendering. So if it's possible to do your 4K render from inside Unity doing a capture, then yeah, that's probably very easy, and it might just be a matter of grabbing some time and learning how to pilot it so that you can line up the camera. And if it is lining up the camera, then I can show you that in a 30-minute lesson where your pizza's free.
So hard here, guys. Look at this. You have to be a Brendel level genius to figure this out. Because even to just see the camera view, there's all kinds of camera things here, but how do you make the camera view big? Double click and it goes.
You play.
Oh yeah, of course. All right, so you play it. I clicked the play button. Okay. Whoops, I clicked it, stopped it. Okay, hang on, it's trying. See, it's pretty good, huh? Obviously, the framing is completely shot to pieces.
Yeah, okay, so hit play.
Yeah, again, yeah.
I think it's playing.
So how do I move the camera?
So now, You use the blue and red arrows there on the screen. So pull to use the blue. No, the blue arrow on the.
No, I know, but I'm just
Uh,
trying to get the view of where we are because X, Y, Z. So I want to move it up the Z, but which one is the Z? Is that this blue?
Yeah. So drag that back.
Okay, that's good.
Now maybe use your mouse wheel or whatever to scroll out.
2 fingers.
You're currently looking at it from the top view, so undo that so that you're still aligned in X. And so now click X. So that where it says top on that there. If you actually click on the X button, the X thing, then that'll give you a different view.
Okay.
Now you're in the right view, things like that. So you can tumble around and get to a point where you can see where the camera is and things like that. If you hit F, you have the ability to frame the selection and be able to see all of the stuff that you have in a way that means that you can kind of figure out where to put stuff.
Cue music from 2001.
Yeah, and now you can if you I think it's what command left click should be able to allow you to tumble in this view, and you can pull it back. Yeah. Now in the camera settings, if you go to the click on the camera, and right now you have so you've got collaborate tab open. Click on inspector. You're able to change the parameters here. If you want to set it from skybox, you can change it to black instead. The default skybox in Unity is not particularly thrilling. So click on skybox, go solid color. There you go.
Let's see if it renders, guys. Can we make it full screen?
Yeah, you press something like Shift space or Shift tab. Or you click on the maximize on play button.
I'm sorry, where did you say, where's that?
It's in that title bar above the thing where it says just below with the play button. So in the game tab. Yeah, to the right. Maximize on play. That'll do it next time. But if you want to click on the fly out, the 3 dots just above and to the right of that, then you can do it at any time. But yeah, there you go.
It's not perfect, but it is pretty good, right, guys?
Yeah.
And if the light is in a more interesting position.
You can see the cloud layer is moving at a different rate than the ground layer. So that's good.
Yeah. Okay, well, see, with all this technology, having Brandel spend, what, 120 seconds? Something, knowledge, human knowledge does matter. So where's the directional light then? So if we look, how do we look from the...
So you're in move. Yeah, so you're in move mode. You can either specify the rotation of it. So click back on the directional light. Maybe you want to be in a view where you can see the impact on the Earth. I mean, you can look at it from your in camera as well, but you click, click the directional light.
Yeah.
Right, so, and now you need to change the rotation of it. So it actually doesn't matter where it is in the scene, it just matters what angle it's on. So right now you're in the scale tool in the top left-hand corner. You can see there's the hand and then the very top left of the entire window.
But can I manipulate this while I'm looking at the Earth?
Yeah, if you zoom out a little bit, so if you pinch on your trackpad to scroll out.
But I still don't know, what I mean is looking at the Earth through the camera, so.
Yeah, so you could do that by adding another panel. How do you add panels in Unity? I will turn on my PC. I don't tend to manipulate my workspace because most of the stuff that I do in Unity is for VR. Actually, I wonder if my license has expired because it's been so long since I opened it.
Guys, isn't this fascinating? Or am I the only one who's not, not super bored?
I don't have a license installed at the moment. Okay, so I can't do it there.
Okay, so I'm trying to zoom out.
So what you're doing there is that's the scale tool. So in the top left-hand corner, there's the
Thank you.
that's the rotate tool. There you go. You can also specify those numerically. You see in the transform panel in the top right-hand corner, it says transform. It says position, rotation, scale.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you can see those. Yeah. You can also change the exposure settings if you find that it's blowing out a little bit. Then you can pull that down if the light's right where it is, and then that would be under your camera settings. You can also turn the intensity of the light down here. So
Have you guys seen the series on Netflix, the whatever robots, something robots, like 20-minute?
Love, Death and Robots.
Yes, thank you.
I have not.
Incredible quality production. What do you think, Fabian?
Pretty good. And it's always a bit different, but it's a little bit, I don't know, like shorts with completely different style than the dystopian Brit one of a couple of years ago.
So now it's going to take me literally a year to get the lighting done on this, but okay, I can do that offline, so to speak.
There are people whose job is only to do lightning in 3D. So
Yeah.
don't feel bad if it actually literally takes you years.
Yes, good point. Okay, just before you leave me here, how can I have the normal camera view and this at the same time? Is that possible?
Yeah, you would do that by adding another tab somewhere. I'm just my Unity license expired on my. Let's see, and I think I don't have the Unity stuff on this Mac.
Oh, okay. So here you can see how the sun actually is in not a bad position now. Not ideal, but at least. But is there an option to render this animation out? Or do I have to just screen? Because if you do it by screen, we get that aliasing issue.
I will say Unity's not really. Unity's not for making movies for the most part. People probably do, and there might even be scripts for being able to output the JPEG sequence or the TIFF, like an AXR sequence or something. Yeah.
Well, is there a render setting I can do to alias backgrounds for this view, for the play view?
To change the anti-aliasing here.
But yeah, turn on anti-aliasing.
Possibly, it would be under your sort of display and render settings and things like that. So if you go, so jump out of this.
Sorry, it's a bit mesmerizing.
Yeah, it's a whole rabbit hole of technology. You click on your camera, main camera, and then in the outliner. So in the bottom right hand corner, where where it says like HDR and MSAA, that's not the high dynamic range and the multi-sample with anti-aliasing. And the inspector tab on the right. Move the mouse over to the bottom of there. So if you go to MSAA, see what's available.
Oh, right.
I see. So it says use graphics settings, which means that it'll be up under your actual graphics setting. So that depends at some level on what kind of graphics capabilities you have on this device. And I don't remember where they are because Unity is actually pretty inconsistent as to where it sort of dumps a bunch of dumps a bunch of the settings. It's kind of googly in that regard. But there's a render settings panel somewhere. But you're at essentially at the mercy of whatever computational power you have on this machine. So if you're on a MacBook Air or a small MacBook Pro, then you are much more poorly disposed to being able to get interesting things happening than if you were on a studio or on a PC that has sort of VR class hardware, which I still recommend that you do. It would be really, really valuable for you to get if your heart's in it, to get a PC with a 3090 or something, because then you can actually plug your Quest in and get full access to Google Earth VR, which is still a very interesting application. Yeah. So I'm not entirely sure where to find all of the render settings and things like that at this instant. I don't remember, and I don't have I don't know how to get my Unity license back up and running.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. So I just now rendered, I just recorded this. So then, ta-da, Final Cut. It is insane having things like Final Cut on a normal computer, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway,
This is normally followed by someone saying, well, why can't I get this on my phone?
yes, exactly. Where is that? Put that here. No, make it custom, make it full screen. There we go. Boom, delete. It's amazing. I now have the interfaces from Unity in Final Cut and have the overlay of you guys. So let's just make that fit. Remove the audio because that's just us talking. And this is what I was going to look at, exposure. Things like this. And then of course, maybe reduce saturation so it looks a bit more realistic. Then of course, we could easily add a mask to get rid of all this stuff. But instead of that, why don't we just do this? Obviously, there's a bit missing.
Where is that stupid password?
I was going to say the missing bit for people in the Northern Hemisphere is probably completely lost.
There are numerous websites devoted to maps of the world without New Zealand that we all become painfully familiar with.
Indeed.
Down in the Antipodes.
Yeah.
Well, that was educational. That was really, really interesting. What do all of you think? Wasn't that interesting to see the whole Unity thing? It is approachable. We can all learn it. It's just we need a proper teacher like Brandel to try to learn it from someone online. Just talking in a linear thing and not being able to ask questions is really, really difficult. Because they are going to teach you how to build a game or something, and then the scripting. They're not going to teach you what you need to know, right?
Yeah, I can attest to that. I mean, in a different frame, I'm helping someone, well, have been for about 2.5 years now, helping someone who about halfway through is profoundly dyslexic. So anything that purports to be code is just like text doubled in complexity. Yeah, so actually, short of really sitting there saying, okay, just tell me the point at which it didn't make sense. It works there, but otherwise, you can. The trouble is, you end up writing an essay, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm writing an essay to someone who doesn't read essays, or not won't, but has trouble. And so, well, going back to Carl's point right at the top of the show, kind of thing, is thinking about accessibility and these things is important.
Yes, it is. The material, this atmosphere color rotate, it is very, very easy to get entirely lost in here.
Yes, very much so. I mean, Unity and Blender and ZBrush and all of these different apps. They have sort of common metaphors, but it's a whole world that many people spend their entire lives in, and so it is. I think one of those things that will become easier with virtual reality, but it's going to be a long time until it's actually easy. And people who are trying to build how virtual reality should be easy in it are pitted with the worst task of all, which is trying to make something that is very difficult right now imaginable as some kind of hypothetical future easy thing. It's real. It's really painful.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's one of the things I've been talking to a lot of people at Apple about recently is what should the web be like, and what is a useful way of presenting things. And I said because WebGL is what Fabian and I use for everything, and I have had a lot of fun with it, but I haven't succeeded in getting a lot of other people to be able to do much with it in comparison. And much of what they have done is just literally taken my libraries and changed a couple numbers. And that's fun for me and great kudos, but it means that it's probably the wrong level of abstraction for the kinds of things that people should do to make the world 3D and interesting. And so I'm really excited about Model Tag, and really, really excited about, it's actually available in Safari, I think not even in technology preview, but actually in, what's the current one? Monterey, right? I think certainly in Safari Technology Preview in Monterey, but also in iOS now. The Model Tag is available behind a developer flag, and so you'll be able to see native 3D objects actually manipulable without the benefit of a 3D library like WebGL. I have high hopes for that. I managed to programmatically export an animated USDC according to the sort of the keyframe animations that come in through GLTM and stuff like that. I need to figure out whether I would be able to post back to the Three.js core because it's fun and nobody's done it yet. I don't know if anybody's planning to, but I'm happy to get it in there.
It's really interesting in sort of what you're saying there. It just shows the difficult, sort of that sort of hinge pivot point where it gets to the point where people can suddenly do something with it. And it's not always just about the tech. I mean, it's that rough combination. Oh, right. So I can not only do this, but I can do this in a manner that I don't need to have someone sitting behind me, or rather be directing someone else to do it.
Exactly.
It makes me think back to sort of old days. Gosh, when we go to sort of print, going to publishers, and they used to have the poor human monkey who was the Photoshop operator with a press guy. So who knew the antithesis? There was the Venn diagram of what they understood had hardly an intersection, and someone tries, well, I just want to do with that. So we've come a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I was out at drinks with some of the folks who do the computer graphics for Apple for for WWDC and if there's any new hardware that they do the beautiful sort of fly-throughs and whatever, and he was just absolutely mind blown at the concept of that we might use animals as machines. And it's like I don't know what to tell you about your job, man.
What do you mean animals as machines? In which context? That's an interesting.
Well, so like before we had mechanical tractors and things like that, we had specific animals that we used in that way. And like I'm really taken by the concept of spit dogs. I think they're amazing. The fact that there are these wheels in large sort of industrial kitchens in the UK, and you would you have a special sort of a special kind of platform to raise a small dog up onto, so that it would stand in a wheel and run all day to turn your spit roast. And if it's not the sort of a quarter horsepower, like just treating a small animal as the equivalent of a sort of a quarter horsepower engine, then I don't know what is.
That's right.
I,
Well,
I
we,
just
need to
love
put
it.
a, we need to put a smaller dog on. It's getting overcooked.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, like it's the way we use computer operators for a number of tasks is not entirely similar. I was just going to say.
Absolutely, I think that's much overlooked, and it's a sad. It paints a sad picture about our general unwillingness to look outside our sort of domain of expertise, which is a sad thing we're just not taught to do. You
Yeah.
don't have to understand everything that somebody else does, but it doesn't take much to at least to have a meaningful conversation, which is often just picking up a bit of the vernacular.
Yeah. If Rhoda, I've got my Unity back up if you want me to tell you how to put the camera tab in there.
Yeah, I mean, can I even share this with you? Like a proper Unity thing? They have all kinds of collaboration, or is that like a hugely different thing?
I think you need to be in the same organization, possibly, and my Unity stuff is all sort of connected to corporate, so I don't know that I would be able to mix it. But what you can do is, say, if you wanted to put a little camera preview in the inspector tab, then click on the inspector tab on the top right.
I'm just giving you access here to take over if you want to.
Oh, sure. Okay. Shouldn't be necessary, but if you want, then I can.
But maybe for all of us, let's say, oh my God, you're controlling my screen. Hang on, I'm just gonna.
That's a bad thing, isn't it?
I'm just clicking one button so I can see you guys on the side here.
Sure.
And then I will give you. All right, have fun.
Okay, so hopefully, am I only given left click access?
Oh, I don't
So
know.
I can't see if there's a context menu that's come up, I haven't seen. Oh no, there we go. Add tab. Game.
Oh. Did you see that?
And then
That's magic. Well, that's even by itself, that's amazing. So, of course, you can have different screens, as I'm sure a lot of people do when they do these things.
yeah, and so the trick is to get it so it's very difficult with the latency here, but you can sort of tear that off so that you have your inspector if you so desire. Oh, that's not where I want it.
No, but that's good though, right? Isn't it? That's useful for the sunny thing.
Well, it's not yes, but it's not exactly the aspect ratio you want. So what I was trying to do is get it so that it's in the right hand side, just above the inspector tab, containing that vertical space there, which I've done on my computer over here, but I didn't quite understand the keystrokes. But yeah, so you can drag that around.
So now the next
And
becomes the sun is in an okay position now, but it seems that the self-lighting in the shadow side of the world is too strong. That would be okay.
Yeah. So there will be other settings that we can play with here. Yeah, I was so close to what I wanted. So put the inspector down. There we go. This is what I want. No, that's not what I want. This is why user interfaces need to have low latency.
Okay, I'll try to move it. Will I do it? I'll move it down to project maybe. Here, I'll do it. See if it's
yeah.
not.
So if you what I want to do is get that so drag the actual inspector word in the tab rather than the window title.
This one.
So yeah, that one. And well, you could put it here. Yeah, that will be fine. But I was going to put it in the right over underneath the yeah. So put it below the world. Yeah, like that. Perfect. Now you can drag it up so that you have a box of approximately the appropriate aspect ratio that you desire for the actual shot.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Now, if you click, so now you can toggle around in your scene view. You can also click on your directional light and be able to configure that. So if you turn the intensity to 0 there, we'll see what kind of lighting you have. You can also disable my sharing because I don't need to do anything anymore. So this is what your light looks like with absolutely nothing. Everything else there is additive. So that gives you a sense of the headroom that you have and whether there's a specific sort of color temperature that you want to be able to compensate for or anything like that. Yeah, so a 3, yeah, it's gonna kill it. And yeah, generally speaking, you're going to be using this is probably going to be a fixed dynamic range rather than a high dynamic range image that you'll be creating. So you don't want to, you probably don't want it to clip out of white, or if you do, then it's absolutely the most minimal, and relying on the sort of remaining bit depth to make sure that you can do your color grading elsewhere. Yeah.
Well, I like the whole trying to cancel your cable vibe going on in the bottom left-hand corner.
Huh? Oh yeah, I don't know what that is.
You can't cancel. You cannot cancel.
It says I can't cancel, but okay. So yeah. But okay, so here's a really important question then for this. The clouds here and the shadow are way too bright. Is there an easy way, or is that a whole new material? Okay, we should go to assets, right?
If you click on that, no, you click on the cloud shadows in the top left. The thing on the top left area where the sample scene, that's it's called your outliner or your hierarchy. So you have your cloud shadows parameters here that you can kind of look at and think through. It also looks like maybe it's expecting you to assign the light on the Earth 8K prefab. Sometimes things are specified specifically on the sub objects, and sometimes it's only on the root object. So maybe it's possible that all of the parameters are actually on the Earth 8K prefab that you have at the top of the hierarchy. That's in your sample scene thing rather than down here.
Yeah, so that's down here. Open prefab. No, hang on.
Not necessarily, because what you have in your scene up the top left is what actually exists in your scene. This is editing the prefab itself rather than the instance of the prefab that exists there. So if you click back on scenes, yeah, there you go. So here you have got your Earth, ground, and sky from space,
oh, hang on.
And all of those kinds of bits and pieces.
Normal strength. Okay, brightness. There we go. That did not.
May not be the one that you have active right now. So you need to take a look at that.
Yep. Oh, here we go. Oh my gosh, guys. Huh?
The system works.
Okay, so. All right. So, but then, okay, so that's brightness. But then what we actually need is that's own brightness, but we should be able to set how it relates to light, right?
It depends on how it's being illuminated. I mean,
it should be not brightness at all, but if there's sunlight on it or external light, then it should appear, right?
It depends on how they've written it. I mean, if it's supposed to be responding to the light, then yes, but it's entirely possible for people to play with unlit shaders that are simulating light and things like that. So it's a possibility that it also the error message was saying that you hadn't linked your actual light to the object, and so it's a possibility that the prefab deals with some of those things once you do that. So if you click on the Earth 8K in the top left corner, then
night
you
light
might be able to.
Wow.
Oh, there you go.
Reflect Shininess. That's better.
Yeah.
Yeah, which
I also have to go in the 2 minutes, but yeah. So Unity is actually really. The more I look at you doing this, the more I realize that it is a very, very useful thing for people to be able to kind of play with and look at things. And if you had a PC, then you would be able to jump straight into VR from here as well, and actually edit and manipulate things at the same time. You know, it's the sort of thing that would be lovely for a Mac to do. It's not possible right now.
are you sure for Apple?
I do. I am. They bought me a PC to do this.
Right, okay, so let's look at this. Dum, da-da-dum, dum. Is this something to do with?
What's the big
Yeah,
Bernie
if you-
thing? Is that a thermobaric reaction going off in the top left-hand corner? The sort of the big blob. Is that, or is that the sun shining back at us?
Oh, in this view, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, in the top right, there's sort of the big burnout in the Pacific Ocean. There's been like a massive that the sort of the
Sun.
yellow bit.
I know you're British, but have you never seen the sun?
Well,
I'm gonna go.
the
Well
number
done,
of times I've travelled off the planet have been zero. Bye. Really good. Thanks, Brando. Really interesting. So I must confess, I have never actually left the planet. It may not seem like that, but actually I have not.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure if I believe you. For some reason, it won't render now. Obviously,
Sorry?
Brandel has killed everything because it won't actually render now. But that's probably just to quit and start up again.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah, but again, you see, this is really interesting. I mean, it's really interesting to see this. I don't pretend to understand half of what's going on, but it's lovely to see. I mean, this is something I found myself trying to teach my young fellow doctoral students, is if you never bother to watch what other people do and only, keep your head, you swim firmly in lane, then you don't learn anything.
Indeed.
And that makes you can't contribute as much. So, I don't understand, and nor do I have the background to leverage to do this, which you do from your arts training. But nonetheless, I see what it does. I see what it could do, and I see what somebody who is skilled in it could do. And that, to me, is the important thing of watching it.
Well, this is really interesting. It's different depending on where the light is hitting it from. Can you notice that? It must have something to do with that skybox. Okay, I'm going to save. I'm going to quit because some kind of nonsense is happening. And start again. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? That last image there.
Yeah. It looks like St. Thomas is going up in flames.
Where was that? Okay, so it says, oh, it's already running, and then let's see what happens. Okay. I'm going to record the screen here in case it actually works. Where's yeah, it's 2 minutes past 6. New screen recording. Make you guys really tiny.
Tiny people.
Why has it stopped rendering?
Rendering where? What, in the main panel you're looking at, or on the side? Or?
Yeah. We had, or maybe I have to set that it has to be that camera. Let's just give it a few seconds. Yeah. So it's giving me programming stuff. Okay, double click on that, see. The variable sun atmosphere not been assigned. You probably need to find this. What in the world?
This is a bit like me trying to get Time Machine to work. Yes. So which bit are you expecting to change? The picture of the globe on the right?
No, I want this picture here to just go full screen.
Okay.
And that's kind of doing it now.
Ooh.
That doesn't look so bad at all, does it?
Yeah, bit of Richard Strauss over the top. And that would go quite well for me.
All right, I will, oops, yeah, I will try to render that, let it render at 360, make a video, I'll put it on YouTube. So at least we can try it on the YouTube player just for initial feelings. And then if it works, then I'll pay this guy just to wrap it into an app. So we see it in a black room without any distraction. Yeah. All right, thanks, guys. That was an interesting session in many ways. And maybe, Mark, you want to do a session specifically on Noda because you're getting a lot of knowledge there.
Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, I'm just feeling stuff forward. I mean, it's made me get back and think about the most interesting thing I got, funnily enough, from the time spent in Noda, and it's this sounds counterintuitive, was what it didn't do. So I guess I thought I guess I thought I'd use it and it would unpack in the same way as when I first used Visio on a PC moons ago. And it doesn't. I can see how people might use it and do things, but what it doesn't do to someone who's interested in exploring information is I haven't yet found what extra the extra dimension or the extra dimensionality actually gives me. Yeah. Because what I've learned over the years is understanding data is about understanding data, not the pretty views.
Yes. Yeah. No, finding out how useful VR is actually hard, but don't say that in front of Peter.
No. And also, I mean, it's always difficult because I mean, I'm probably very plain spoken, but if I find something subpar in first aspect, doesn't mean that I necessarily think it is without value in the long term. Far from it. Absolutely not. I mean, I would not be doing this if I was, some kind of near Luddite. Far from it. Yeah. And also sometimes it's just because it's also sometimes because you don't get immediately what it's about. There's something there, but you haven't quite just breasted the hill to see, right, even if I can't do it, there's something beyond that I could use if I knew how. And that's the really interesting part of the journey to me. It's okay, right, there's something useful in it. I may not use it, but I definitely don't want to impede the people who do. Yeah. Because there's so much what I see is people saying, no, I don't understand it, we're not going to do that. And I find that so sad because all sorts of really useful things just get immediately put out of scope, and I don't find that useful.
Indeed. Okay, I'm going to
have a good weekend, guys.
Yeah, you too. I'm going to try to figure this rendering thing out. Have a good weekend. Bye for now.
Fred, before you go, just completely unrelated to recording and the like, so you can turn the recording off.
Mark, I'll call you on FaceTime.
Okay, yeah, cool.